Ahead on Face the State, what in the state needs fixing? And can it be fixed? We'll talk with Gary Rose about his new book detailing the issues facing Governor Lamont and a look back at the epic 2018 governor's race. One of those candidates is with us today, David Stemmerman, on what he would be doing differently had he won. And taking care of those who are still suffering from the effects of 9/11. Lee Kalmar is battling breast cancer after exposure at Ground Zero. She's here with Michael Barash, representing many of those fighting for their lives 18 years after 9/11. It's all straight ahead this Sunday, July 28th, 2019.
From Eyewitness News, Connecticut's most watched local political program, this is Face the State.
Good morning, everyone. It is 8:30. I'm Dennis House. Thanks for joining us. Are the problems facing Connecticut a year ago during the governor's race of 2018 being worked on today? Are they close to being solved? With us today is the author of a new book, Gary Rose. He is from Sacred Heart University, and the book is called Connecticut in Crisis: Policy Challenges and the 2018 Contest for Governor. It's a nice, catchy title, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I enjoyed reading it this past weekend, by the way, because as you know,
glad to hear that.
The governor's race is kind of a big deal here. What did you learn most of all as you researched the race?
You know, I knew there were problems facing Connecticut, and I've done some research on Connecticut before, but I never realized how deep these problems go. With respect to the business environment, infrastructure, taxation, the problems within the cities, entitlements, pension liabilities. I mean, I knew we had these issues out there, but when I really delved into it, that's when I realized just how serious the problem was. And all of these, consulting firms, outside organizations that do ratings and so forth, I was particularly dismayed at how low Connecticut is rated on so many areas. And so hence the title of the book, Crisis. I mean, again, I was perhaps a little reluctant to use that term, but I really felt after doing the research, particularly in the policy part of it, that our state is really one state that has changed dramatically, not for the better.
In 2018, we had about a dozen candidates from the start of the year to the end. It's now Governor Lamont, of course. They're his issues to deal with. Is he handling them the right way, in your opinion?
Well, we're only looking at his first term. And I think he is trying. I think he is trying to negotiate some issues here to address these issues. But quite frankly, I do wonder if, minimum wage legislation that passed, family leave, and some of the other issues that he's talked about, whether or not those are really going to the core of the problems that we have. And honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed that there hasn't been more of a concerted effort to address some of these serious issues that I have addressed in this text here.
And you write at length about the companies that announced they were going to be leaving Connecticut.
That's
General
right.
Electric
Yes,
was the top of that list.
Yeah.
Do you think that attitude by business leaders has changed toward Connecticut?
No.
We haven't really heard of any businesses leaving recently.
But the attitude is still there. There's a problem. Business leaders, as of course the surveys show, don't feel that there's a lot of support for free enterprise and, the startup businesses that perhaps some of them would like to do, or expanding their businesses. And so, quite honestly, I would say that not much has changed from the Malloy era to the so-called Lamont era. And again, it's in fairness to the governor, he's only been in office for 1 year, and one term, I should say, and he's working on these issues, but he still has 3 years left, again, 1 year. But I would say that the business environment that's out there is still very cautious and not necessarily very supportive of what's happening up in Hartford.
Governor Dan Malloy was very unpopular. Many said it was Republicans, it was their year, it was their race to lose. How did they lose it? How did they blow it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it had an awful lot to do with the votes within the cities. We do have a lot of problems. Bob Stefanowski did get over 650,000 votes, but nevertheless, I really felt that the urban vote, and in particular the Democratic ground game, was probably better than the Republican vote and the Republican campaign speaking. And I felt that that once the urban vote started to come in, and actually, I was on the air that night, and I thought that Stefanowski was going to win this election because the polls really had tightened at the very end. But in the end, when I learned that all of the urban vote had not been counted yet, like New Haven hadn't come in, I knew then that the election was going to change. So I would say that it really was, in the end, the ground game, in particular the urban vote, that delivered the election to Lamont.
Why do Republicans insist on writing off the cities? You look in Hartford, they have not even declared a candidate yet in a field of 6. There are 6 Democrats, and there's no Republican just yet. They have their conventions usually at the casino, sort of away from the cosmopolitan atmosphere that you tend to get in the cities.
Well, so much of it has to do with the voter registration. The registration is so lopsided in the cities on behalf of the Democratic Party that a lot of Republicans, and the only way that they can win is to mine the independent vote, which also leans towards the Democratic Party. And so one problem is the demographics. And if you really look at the demographics of the Republican Party, those demographics are not in the cities in Connecticut.
But with millennials moving into the cities, do they have a chance at all?
Well, millennials are not Republicans either. A lot of them are unaffiliated, and a lot of them actually lean to the Democratic Party. Millennials today, and whatever generation you want to call, X or Y, they certainly lean to the left on so many of these issues. Healthcare issues, and then of course, the free college issue is big to them. And so generally speaking, the young voters in Connecticut are not of a conservative stripe, and that makes it very difficult for the Republican Party.
How did the Trump factor figure into all this in 2018?
The Trump factor was there, and when we had the local elections prior to the state election, you could see that the Trump factor was at work in a lot of communities, because in a lot of the town councils flipped from Republican to Democrat, largely because of Trump. And once again, the Trump factor was big in this last election. Now, in fairness here, there was also a Malloy factor, and I think that helps Stefanowski. Both Malloy and Trump figuratively were at the top of the tickets, but nevertheless, a very strong anti-Trump feeling that was out there in the electorate, and I do believe that entered into the final equation.
I want to talk about some of the potential candidates for next go-around in 2022. Many of these Republicans are still keeping their names out there, and we'll talk about David Stemmerman for a moment because he's on the program a little bit later. You wrote about him. You said he's made some mistakes. What were they?
Well, I felt, and I know David's going to be on. He's sitting right over there, so it's kind of interesting to say this.
Don't be shy.
Right. I felt that his campaign was a little too packaged, and I don't think that it really connected with a lot of the working people here in Connecticut. It was very cleverly done, I would say, with the computer imagery and everybody in a box, and I think that was appealing. But at the same time, I felt that David's approach seemed perhaps a little too distant from the voters, whereas Bob Stefanowski, I felt, was able to have a better connection with a lot of the white working class voters in Connecticut, whereas David, I don't think, did.
You'll say right here, you wrote, Stemmerman likely learned from his own mistakes, learned much about the character of Connecticut politics during his bid for governor. It's likely that he will appear again as a candidate for public office. Historically, voters don't like someone who lost the big race 4 years prior. Tom Foley was rejected, Bill Curry was rejected, Bob Stefanowski obviously lost last time. Some believe he'll run again, but some say that he won't, that they want a fresher face. Could Stemmerman fit that bill?
Oh, I think that Stemmerman could definitely make a comeback. I know that right now Stefanowski is probably the face of the Republican Party, but I think the Republican Party right now is still looking for someone to really, carry the torch here for what this party represents. And David, I believe, sitting right over there, David certainly, I think, learned an awful lot from this campaign, and I wouldn't at all be surprised if what he has learned he applies in a subsequent campaign.
Well, certainly we're going to ask him that coming up. All right, Gary Rose from Sacred Heart University, we thank you so much for being on the program today. The new book is on Amazon and in bookstores right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. In a moment, we will talk with David Stemmerman. A little bit later, those who became sick after 9/11. Help is on the way, and we'll talk with 2 people who are intensely involved in this effort. We also welcome you to watch past editions of Face the State on our website right now, our app, or our YouTube channel.